Well, what do you know? There's Team Health right there on my computer screen. I'm so glad to have you here today. Uh, hey, I know that several of you have made mention of Dr. Romany's interview yesterday, and that was pretty thrilling to have her on there with me, and I appreciate all the support you all have given. So we're going to keep bringing more interviews. From time to when I do my podcast, sometimes I just go solo. Other times I'm putting up interviews, and so what I'm doing now is whenever I have interviews, I'm going ahead and put them on the YouTube as well. We can record it and I'm glad you enjoyed that yesterday. I enjoyed having it with you. By the way, Dr. Romney has some company she's going to have to. Yeah, just in terms of the level of interest, Dr. George Simon, when I had him on several months ago, generated a whole lot of interest, and so did Dr. Romney. So we're going to see which one of them wins that sweepstakes. Okay, yeah, here I say that in a few minutes. I'm going to talk about how narcissists are competitive. There you go. There I am with that. Hey, I'm pleased to have you here with me, and we're going to be talking today about how narcissists are stuck, but they don't have to. But you don't have to be. One of the things that I'm just constantly in amazement of is the level of predictability that we have when we are talking about the topic of narcissism. Narcissists differ, obviously, with respect to temperament types or their place of origin or cultural influences and things like that. And yet, the pattern of narcissism itself, once it just becomes entrenched inside that individual's personality, it can bring all sorts of very predictable ways of responses. For example, when you have this natural inclination to be self-absorbed, well, that leads to all sorts of characteristics. Or when you have a natural inclination to want to be the one that's in control and you have to have the final word, that brings its predictabilities. And one of the things that keeps them stuck in their predictable patterns is the refusal for them to take responsibility for their obvious dysfunction. You can see the dysfunction, and then if you call them out, you know what they're going to do, don't you? They're going to flip it around and say, well, it must be your fault. Because they have too enamored of a view of themselves that in order for them to admit that they really can be troubled souls. And so if there's a problem, well, someone has to be the blame. And well, it's not me. So there you have it. So it's going to be essential for us to see that they're the ones who are stuck. I hope that you and I can be in a growth mode and get beyond that. Let me give you a simple illustration about how this can happen. I wonder how many of you have been to an old high school reunion. Okay. And the 10-year reunion doesn't count because you're not far enough down the road. 20, 30, and then those many years beyond the road, then you begin to see certain patterns that emerge with those that you knew back in your adolescent years. It's interesting as let's say you're at your 30-year high school reunion and you're looking back. Sometimes when you go to that reunion, you're going to see some individuals that maybe were a bit troubled back in the adolescent days, or you didn't really connect with them. But later on, it's like, wow, some really good things have happened. And this is somebody who seems to have grown and matured, and they bring so much to the equation. What a delight to be reacquainted with this person and see how they've had an expansive view of themselves and the world. And then you have those folks over there, they may be 48 years old, and they're still acting like that 16-year-old kid from many decades ago. And it's like, you haven't changed, have you? And I don't mean that as a compliment. And there's some individuals that just they seem so stuck in their old ways that that growth and that maturation process hasn't happened. That's what we're talking about when we deal with narcissists. Hopefully, you and I can be the kind of individuals here on Team Healthy where we're going to grow till the day we die and learn new things and make adjustments and show greater wisdom and maturity, not the narcissist. So, having said all of that, let's just dive in with our questions here today. And by the way, I have some questions left over from from the webinar that we did on the covert narcissist and the post-traumatic stress. We did that a couple of days ago. And for those of you who participated in that, thank you so much. I really enjoyed doing it. I put out a whole lot of information. And for those of you who did not, but would be interested, those webinars and the ones I've done previous are available on our survivingnarcissism.tv. You can get them anytime you want. So just know that they're going to be perpetually available. Okay, so but anyway, I'm going to be interspersing some of the questions from that in my remarks in the next several weeks. Okay. Okay. The first question comes in like this. This person says, "I'm an adult daughter of a covert narcissistic father. I find that I have some very competitive and perfectionist characteristics. Is that from having low self-esteem?" Well, let's go back and remember one of the patterns that narcissists are stuck in is what she's describing right here. They have this edge of competitiveness. They have this perfectionism, and when I say perfectionism, some of them are very nitpicky and things have to be a certain way. Others, they're just kind of idealistic, thinking, "Well, I'm the gold standard, and well, that's enough." And so they're very enamored with themselves. Part of their narcissistic pattern, because they're so enamored with oneself and they have to be in the superior position, is they think in binary terms: in, out, right, wrong. And then one of their favorite binary terms is winner, loser. And guess which end of the equation they're going to be on, and guess which end of the equation you're going to be on. It's so easy. It's so interesting when you interact with narcissists to watch how they quickly will turn a conversation into a competition. For example, if you say, "Here's my preference about how I'm going to cook some soup," something simple, and they come along and say, "Well, I don't know if I would have done it that way. I think this is the better way." Or if you talk about how a certain thing happened to you at work, that narcissist can come along and say, "Well, I don't know why you would do it this way." Or if you express an opinion and you're just in some sort of discussion with that person, it's like, "I don't know where you came up with that, but that's not right." They're constantly in this one up kind of mindset. I'm right, which means automatically you're wrong. And so this woman is saying, "Well, I find that I have some competitive and now some perfectionistic traits. Is that part of having low self esteem?" And the answer is yes. Narcissists are so profoundly insecure. They're so profoundly comparative in the way that they engage with other individuals that they're not able to say, "Well, I have my thoughts, but I'd like to hear yours. I have my opinions, but let's give equal credence to your opinions." They've got to be the winner. And so, to this woman who says, "Now I see it in myself," it's like, right, you were trained to think that way because that's the system that you were brought up in. But let's keep in mind that when we talk about relationships, especially inside of our closest primary relationships, it's not about competition. Healthy relationships are about collaboration. I have my needs, but I recognize you have your needs. I have my distinctives just as you have yours. And let's not put it on a who's better and who's worse, who's more correct and who's less correct. And let's just say, "I'd like to get to know you." And that's something that is part of a healthy way of life. But when you say, "Is that low self esteem?" Yes, you're still trying to prove that you're okay. Drop it. That's the narcissist garbage that they put onto you. And you don't have to keep proving yourself to be the winner. The best way you win is get out of the competition. Again, it's about collaboration, not competition. So watch how you engage with others in that respect. Now, this next comment, and I'm going to read this, and this person describes a statement that the narcissist uses. And as I give this statement, I want you to think, what's the hidden message behind this statement? And we're going to see how it illustrates that this person is stuck and they just can't get it. They can't help from getting away from themselves. Okay, here it is. This person says, "If I bring up a problem that she does, she says, 'What do you want me to do about it?'" Okay, that's the statement. "What do you want me to do about it?" in a very sarcastic and angry tone, of course. And this is the typical narcissistic behavior that I'm exposed to. Okay, so you have this woman that says, well, I'm trying to talk about something that I consider to be a problem with this narcissistic person. And the best response that they can come up with is, well, what do you want me to do about it? Now, I jotted down several things that this tells me is going on with that narcissist. First, that's a very passive aggressive way of responding. The implication is, I don't like what you said, and I'm just going to make you look foolish. Another part of that statement, what do you want me to do about it, implies there's an invalidation. It's like, well, that was a dumb question. In addition, there's a mocking and a ridicule that's part of that statement. Can you see how that would be? Or just in that simple statement, there's a refusal to accept responsibility. That's an easy one to see. Don't talk to me about it. In that comment, what do you want me to do about it? They're using denial. Like, you think I'm the problem? Or you can also see that there's a certain element of blame shifting that's part of it. Let's don't talk about me. Let's talk about you. I'd rather that I'm more comfortable with that. Likewise, in that one simple statement, there's sarcasm. And then, in addition, just kind of covering all of it, there's an element of gaslighting, all wrapped up in that one simple little comment. What do you want me to do about it? Do you see how narcissists have so many different issues beneath the surface that rise when you come along and say, well, I'd like to talk about the differences between you and me. And it doesn't even have to be, that combative kind of conversation, but just a simple comment that says, I'd like to discuss a problem that we're having. That's all it takes. They are stuck. They're stuck in their own dysfunction. They're stuck in their own defensiveness. They're stuck in their own need to condescend over you. And so, when you encounter someone like this, and that's the best kind of response that they can come up with, my reaction is, never mind. What they want when they give you that comment, what do you want me to do about it? They want you to put up your dukes and let's fight. What if you decided, I'm not going to do that? Now, I might bite once and say, well, what I'd like for you to do about it is to have a reasonable conversation with me. That's all I'm asking. Now, there's a real high probability that if you were saying to say something very simple like that, it would not be received well. But I'm not going to be fearful of something like that. But what I am going to do is I'm going to take my cues and realize, okay, this is probably not going to end well. I get it. These are individuals who, I mean, it's like a 6-year-old kid. Me, what about you? It's like, can't we do a little bit better than that? And if the narcissist were honest, it'd be like, no, I'm stuck at age 6. But that's what they do. So that is typical behavior. They've not really progressed well. Part of the reason that they remain stuck in their patterns is that they have not incorporated just normal, healthy adult reasoning. It's pretty sad, isn't it? And when I say adult reasoning, they have raw emotional reaction. I mean, a number of you who are watching this right now, you have little children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews, and you know that they can kind of think in raw emotional mood of the moment kind of thing. And if it's a 6-year-old kid or a 10-year-old kid, it just doesn't surprise you. But you'd like to think that, I don't know what the age of accountability is, 22, 30. 61. I don't know, but at some phrase, a place in their life, you like for that narcissistic person to say, well, I need to knock off all of that other stuff with the denial and the gaslighting and the sarcasm and just have a normal conversation. Part of narcissism, though, is they're stuck. So when you see that, what you don't want to do is you don't want to go too deep into their patterns. And instead, if she says, what do you want me to do about it? I'm probably going to be very. This is where we have that calm firmness that I have mentioned. One of my other webinars was the narcissist anger versus your calm firmness, and the idea is if they come at you with their sarcasm, which is a form of anger, I'm going to have that calmness that says, "Well, I actually do have something that's valid. that I'd like to talk with you about. Here are my concerns. And when they just come back at you in their stuck pattern, well, I just don't agree with that. And they argue and they whine and complain. It's like, well, but nonetheless, that's still important to me. You may not convince them that you have something valid to speak about, but at the same time, you don't have to convince them. You can still be firm, and then you can let it be known, if we're not going to be able to have any kind of meeting of the minds, then here's my boundary. Here's what I'm going to do. These are my plans. And so you might want to adjust accordingly, and know that it might not lend itself to that collaboration that we like. But at some point, it's like, I am not going to get into that silly little game that little children play with each other. No, thank you. I don't do that. Yeah. Here's another one. And this one, when we talk about narcissists are stuck, how about when it's an 80-year-old narcissist? Okay. This person says, I was raised as the scapegoat. My 80-year-old parents still love telling stories of how awful I am. Will they die believing this, or will I ever be vindicated? Okay. Now, 80 years into this, I'm going to go ahead and call it a trend. He said with the great understatement. 80 years and they're still scapegoating you. In other words, there's a problem. And rather than thinking, well, I need to take a look at my share of that problem, it's like, no, as long as you're here, let's just put it on you. That's the scapegoating. And it's like, seriously? And then you keep going back and telling stories about how dysfunctional I am. Um, 80 years and they still haven't figured it out. Now, will you ever be vindicated? You will not be vindicated in their mind. If they're 80 years old and still treating you, and I'm assuming you're in your 50s or somewhere thereabouts, they're still treating you with this disdain. It's like, well, you hate to just give up and say, okay, uncle, you win, because it's not winning. What you can do is you can be vindicated in your own mind. When you were 10 years old, and they were scapegoating, what's wrong with you? Why do you always have to create all the problems in the family? That kind of thing. Or if your sibling is having a bad day, and then they look to you and say, well, what did you do? That's the scapegoat thing. Uh, at age 10, you didn't really have that much of a capability to vindicate yourself and say, well, let me explain to you who I am and how I'm thinking and how I'd like to proceed from there. As a 10-year-old kid, they didn't give you much credibility. And now here you are decades later, and they're still being that way. But the difference now is you do have the ability to rethink who you are. And so they may never change their patterns. They're stuck, but it's like, I'm not going to play that role anymore. And so if they remind you that you did something way back then that was no good, or you were part of the family dysfunction that made everybody else suffer, I think it's okay to, at the very least, register some form of a different thought and say something like, I'm realizing now at age 52 that I think really differently from you, don't I? And you keep making it very plain that that's been going on my entire life. And I'm kind of guessing that 10 years from now, if y'all are still around, you're still going to think that way. And you know what I've concluded? I've concluded that it's okay for me to think differently. In fact, I'm glad that I have my unique opinions and interpretations. If that becomes problematic between me and you, then so be it. But I think I'm going to go ahead and stand on who I am. Can you say that? And I have people that'll, 50 years old, it's like, I can't talk that way to my daddy or my mommy. It's like, at 10, you might not have, but at this point, what do you have to lose? Speak up, and you don't have to argue. Just say it. Just if for no other reason, because keep in mind they're stuck, they're not going to change. But to hear yourself say it, I believe in me. That's your vindication. And I have a different way of relating. Actually, you all played a role in teaching me something different. And the role you played is you showed me how not to do it, which prompts me then to figure out what my better alternatives are. I'm committed to that. I'm learning my lessons. You're a part of that, but you're not joining me. But I'm going to move on. So that's a classic illustration. 80 years into their relationship with each other, and then for as long as you've been on the scene, they're still doing it. That's what I mean when I say narcissists are stuck, but you don't have to be. Speak up, be different. And then when they say, "I don't know what got into her," it's like, I realize you don't know what got into me, do you? But maybe one day, if you're lucky, you will. But in the meantime, I know what got into me: self respect got into me. That's DRC, dignity, respect, and civility. That's what got into me. No apologies offered. Okay. I so like it when people can say, I see what the pattern is now, and I can also see that I don't have to play along with that anymore. And the wonderful relief that it creates on the inside of the person that is able to go into that space. That's where I hope this lady's going to go. All right. Here we go again. I'm going to read this, and I want you to see if you can figure out what some of the subcategories or patterns are that are a part of this particular scenario that I'm going to present here. Okay, the next person says, "Can narcissists even understand that you've gone no contact with them? It appears their worldview does not permit them the ability to see or acknowledge this. Not that it really matters. They can't appear to grow as individuals from anything they perceive around them. So you've decided, I'm pulling back and I'm going to go no contact. And sometimes you just completely go no contact. Sometimes it's of a graduated nature. It's like, okay, I know I'm going to see them at Christmas, or I know I'm going to see them at a wedding or a funeral, but I'm not going to take a whole lot of initiatives to do a lot in between because it just doesn't work out very well. And then they're over there thinking, well, I don't know what's wrong with you. You don't come around as much as you used to. Okay, now, when they look at you as being problematic for not wanting to be around them, what they understand in their mind, their interpretation is you're just a rude person. You're an irresponsible person. You are a non appreciative person. That's what they're thinking toward you. And then, in addition, they're also thinking you're the troublemaker. You are disloyal. You are emotionally dysregulated and dysfunctional. And I have a word for all of that. Want to know what it is? Projection. They see in you what they absolutely will not examine within themselves. So you decide, you know what? This is not working for me, and I'm pulling way back. And their best response is not, I need to figure out how I played a role in that. If there's anything that I may have done that could have contributed to that, I'm going to use this as a learning opportunity. They don't do it. They go into all this blame and all that toward you. And it illustrates I'm not the kind of person that works out my issues. And so, but instead of saying that, they just keep putting the issues onto you. Classic, classic projection. And so I'm hoping you can see that because that's their defense mechanism. They're so insecure, they're so incapable of saying, I have problems, and in my engagements with you, that my problems have been illustrated, and so I need to do something about it, which is what healthy people do. Healthy people don't always do everything exactly right all the time, but when they make mistakes, they take ownership of it. Narcissists, their pattern of being stuck says, I don't do that. In fact, I don't need to. I'm the gold standard. It's like, you're stuck. Got it. Okay. I see it. Now, the next question. And this is a curious one, and one that I'm sure that many of you can relate with. This person says, if the narcissist is so angry inside, why do they get upset when you're angry? So, and that one of the natural byproducts of being in that narcissistic pattern, the high control, the attitude of entitlement, the need for superiority, the manipulation, that they're going to generate all sorts of anger on the inside of other individuals, including you. And so when you say that really bothers me, That bugs me. I don't like it. I can't stand it when you treat me in that disdainful, contemptuous way. They can play this silly little innocent game like, what are you talking about? Now, if you stray from their agenda, they're all over you, and they're going to be very free in letting you know all of the frustrations and the condescension they have for you. In other words, their anger comes out full force. And so what we have is the classic narcissistic pattern of double standards. I get to be angry. You don't get to be angry. Now, many of you know that I started my career with a lot of anger management workshops. And one of the things that I would explain to people is when you feel angry in and of itself, the anger is not necessarily bad. Sometimes it's the impetus for the anger illustrates that you have such an immaturity that, it doesn't make sense. But anger in and of itself isn't always 100% erroneous. In its best and ideal sense, anger can tap into your need to preserve yourself, self-preservation. So, for example, if somebody is rude and condescending and calls me names and is makes interpretations about me that I think are completely off base, if I have a feeling of anger on the inside, I don't think that's wrong. Now, the question is, can I go ahead and address the anger that it provokes in a constructive way? Can I keep my sense of well being about me, the DRC, dignity, respect, and civility? And so I can say something like, there's something here that's bothering me, and it's bothering me significantly. I'd like to talk about that. And you can speak up. It's assertiveness, assertive anger versus aggressive anger. Now, if you have two people in a relationship that say, I'd like to share that with you. I'd like to do the same in reverse. Then actually, that can lead to a great deal of growth. I wish that I could say to you that everything that I think, say, and do inside my marriage or in my closest relationships is perfect, but it's not. Um, and I'm still in an ongoing growth process. I think that I'm further down the path than I was 10 years ago. And then I think I was further down the path then than I was 10 years prior to that. And so let's hope that momentum keeps going. But if somebody becomes angry toward me, it's like, okay, let me hear what you have to say. I'm willing because I still need to grow. You're trying to preserve yourself. I'd like to preserve myself. Let's just put our heads together and do it in a way where we can each benefit and walk away with our self-esteem still intact. Narcissists, though, going back to that whole thing of competition, they'll just think, well, if you differ from me, I have to just destroy you. And they can be demeaning. And so this person, they can be angry on the inside of themselves, but you can't. And it illustrates they're stuck in this notion that says there's only one person in my world whose opinion matters. And what it happens to be me. And they have this weird self-elevating kind of attitude about themselves. And it allows them to demean other individuals. And that's part of their gross lack of insight, and it's part of their deep insecurity. So be aware that their use of anger is probably one of the most obvious ways that they illustrate just how immature and just how fixated they are on maladaptive patterns. You can tell the most about a person's strength of character by watching how they manage conflict. And narcissists don't do that because they're not growth oriented. They're stuck in their little childish kind of temper tantrums in this case. Okay, now this next person, this kind of goes along with the question I just asked. Ask a very simple question, and it says, "Is being overly principled coming from the same place as being loud?" Now, I'm assuming, and the answer is yes. I'm assuming that when this person says, I can be loud or another person can be loud, they don't mean it in a real friendly or complimentary kind of way. Um, One of the things that narcissists must have is they must have a sense of control. And so, that being the case, they've decided, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to establish my principles. and I'm going to let people know what I believe and how I think things ought to be. That's just what they do. They come towards you, and right there is not necessarily that's not the worst thing to say. I'd like for folks to know who I am, but in their need to be in control, uh, they take it as in a very authoritative and authoritarian kind of way, and they also imply, and no one else should be able to question my control. And so they can be loud, they can be forceful, and so they'll take their principles of right versus wrong, and they'll just say, "Well, I know that I'm right, therefore I don't have a problem, pounding the table and being hard and forceful." There's a phrase that I like to use, and I hope this can be something that you'll go along with me on, and that's simply this: I like being right. I also like being loving even better. Okay. I like being right. I like being loving even better. Being right is a good thing. Knowing what you stand for and what you believe is wise and best, and having values and principles and standards, that's great because it's part of you defining who you are and how you want to engage with the world and how you want to conduct yourself. But when someone else comes along and doesn't match pitch, you don't necessarily have to immediately point out to them why they're so wrong. Well, when someone is not of the same right opinion as you, might you ask the question, what would be my loving response? Now, sometimes, particularly if you're in a position of tutorship or guidance towards someone like a kid or something like that, it's fine to express your right convictions at work or wherever, and say, "Here are my thoughts." But at the same time, the greatest influence that you're going to have is not going to come by being dogmatically right in any and every kind of case. Ultimately, when you're known as somebody who knows the essence of love, if you're going to have any kind of influence over someone, that's how you're going to gain the influence. And people actually appreciate when you do stand up for something. If you're a loving person, then it's like, all right, you have a reputation that I can trust. Now, narcissists are so full of themselves that they can't go into that space. But I'm hoping you can see that being principled is not a bad thing at all, but narcissists will glom on in their stuck pattern of control and condescension and superiority, and they'll take their principles and just use it as an excuse to say, well, this is why I have to be loud, and this is why I have to make you feel miserable. It's like, okay. It hasn't worked in the past. I mean, short term, maybe people will collapse, but long term, folks just roll their eyes when you turn around and walk away, but they don't catch on. They are stuck. Okay. Now, another question that we have, and this goes into a very different kind of direction, the passive aggressive. This person says, can a passive aggressive narcissist not even be aware of what they are doing and why? And I have kind of a mixed answer to that. On one hand, oh, they're aware when they go into the passive aggressive form. Some narcissists, particularly coverts, had decided the more out there, the more open I am to explain my reasoning or to explain my feelings, then that gives the other person some ammunition, maybe, to fire back at me, and I don't know that I want to do that. And so they go into the passive aggressive mode. Um, the overtly aggressive person is just going to lambaste you, and they put it all out there. And uh, other folks can think, wow, that person's really way off base. The passive aggressive person has decided, I don't want to set myself up like that. So what they do is they decide, I'll give you the silent treatment. That's my way of conveying, I don't like you, or you bug me, or get out of here. Or it may be that they'll make promises to you about following through on a task, and then they don't do it. That's classic passive aggressive. Or they may become evasive. Or when you text them, they may say, I'll get right back, and then they don't. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways that they can convey their anger in that passive aggressive kind of way. Are they aware of that? Uh, I think, yeah, it's their way of saying, of all the options that I have in front of me, this is going to be the one that's going to bother that other person the most, and I do want to be in control. Therefore, I will do it. Now, those words that I just spoke may not pass through their brain in a conscious way right at the time, but they make decisions. Now, when we ask, are they aware of what they're doing and why they're doing it? The why part, one of the things that we can say about narcissists is they tend not to be high insight people. Now they may have intelligence and be able to break down certain scenarios in an intellectual kind of way, but when it comes to having that inner sense of self-reflection, self-analysis, curiosity about who they are and why they do the things they do, they're so entrenched in the old pattern of blame shifting and defending and denying responsibility that their passive aggressiveness is a part of that. And it's when we talk about something that's subconscious, what we often mean is that pattern is so deeply habituated that it just is like turning on the automatic switch. It just shows up. And so at one level, yes, they know that it can be effective, if we can use that word. But on another level, we can also say, but their insight and wisdom regarding the why, it left the barn a long time ago. So are they aware? Yes and no. Okay. Now you need to be aware so that when they throw their passive aggressive stuff at you, you don't go flailing and arguing or getting to the point of thinking, well, I must be a problem because that's what they want you to do. They love it when you wiggle. It's like, no, I'm not going to wiggle with that. All that tells me is you don't do conflicts very well. All right, let's take a look at the next question. Do you see the pattern that we have here? These narcissistic individuals have such a self-impressed attitude, which actually only illustrates they're not insightful, and as a result, they just keep coming at you with the same old tired out, worn out patterns. Okay, here's the next one. This person says, "I feel confused now. My ex was diagnosed as a narcissist, but the way he walked out from our relationship is completely different than what everyone else says in most of the videos. He just removed himself from our relationship. He's not calling, not texting. He's not even asking about our child. He's gone no contact with us all the way. How should I understand that and what should I expect?" Uh, actually, this isn't completely unheard of. Now, typically, when a narcissist leaves the relationship, they're often, if I can put it this way, flipping the bird at you on the way out the door, and they're not bashful about letting you know how crummy of a human being you are. But what this person is describing here, where they just completely shut down, that narcissist has, do you remember me talking on multiple occasions about how we can define narcissism as the absence of love? This is a classic illustration of the absence of love. It's so pitiable to realize, to narcissists, and this is part of the pattern they're stuck in. When they engage with people, it's transactional only. Narcissists don't have that heart connection. They can be deeply passive aggressive. That's what this is. They cannot manage conflict well at all. So this man, as he leaves, it's like, I don't have an inclination to talk about our problems. I don't know how to do it in a clean and mutually gratifying kind of way. And but of course that person can't say it because they don't have that wisdom or insight. Narcissists have zero empathy, which is illustrated in this scenario. At the core, there's a meanness that they operate with. It's just downright mean to say, I'm just going to let you hang out there in the breeze and I don't care what happens to you. And so in this case, when this person says, how should I understand this? My response is, you're dealing with a person who has a very, very underdeveloped conscience. That's part of the problem that keeps narcissists stuck in their narcissism. And clearly, this person almost has no conscience. Like, I don't have any responsibility for you. Well, actually, if you married someone, you had a kid, yes, you do. But they don't think that way. So, what should you expect? Well, unfortunately, and I don't know if this person's going to come back and because I've heard this scenario and say, "Give me that child, and I'm going to make you miserable, and I'm not going to cooperate financially." I mean, if they're that mean, then why wouldn't they? What it means is you're going to need to go ahead and establish what your assertions, what your boundaries are going to be. I would certainly encourage you to get some wise legal counsel so that they can help you understand, what you're looking at, and make sure you get whatever the law requires of that individual. But you see, this is to me, this is chicken. You know what? When somebody just says, I'm out of here, and they absolutely refuse to engage with you, there's no such thing as no communication. So they're communicating, hate and all of that, and that they think they're winning and they're in control. When in fact, I'm hoping you can decide I'm not going to get on their level. I'm going to do the best that I can to establish my independence, and I need to move on. So let them walk out, but in the meantime, you walk toward your better healthiness. Okay. Now, another person says, can you talk about the narcissist who doesn't care about your side of the family? So, and this is not at all an uncommon thing. I've had situations where one person in a marriage can say, I'm a pretty special person. And the good news is I come from really good stock. And I've got a wonderful family. My mommy or my daddy, they've trained me to think very, very highly of myself. Now, you, on the other hand, you don't, you weren't fortunate enough to have the wonderful family backdrop that I came up in, and so they can have this attitude. I actually had a case where there was a wife who said to the husband 2 months into their marriage, you know that when you get married, you're close to the wife's side of the family, but not the husband's. And of course, he's thinking, who made up that rule? And of course, she would roll her eyes and think, you're too dumb. You don't even know what the rules and standard operating procedures are. There are people that actually think that way. And so, what's going on? And can you figure out why do they do that? Um, Basically, you can see that the narcissist thinks, okay, the best way for me to be comfortable is to get rid of any kind of diversity, get rid of any kind of distinctions that other people have. Let's get rid of any kind of divergence or anything that makes me have to work harder to blend with other individuals. And all I want is complete tight conformity to my preferences and my cravings and my desires. And I'm afraid that my partner here, if they stay too close to the family, they may have preferences or desires or ways of doing things that don't match mine. I'm guessing this is a golden child kind of person that has done this and tries to keep you away from your own family. And it's very much a fear-based way of thinking. I fear anyone who's a little bit too different from me, as opposed to thinking, oh, you're different from me. Perhaps we can learn, and perhaps I can be expansive because of that. They don't think that way. Now, I'm noticing our time has gone. I've got some other questions here, and we could go all day long on this one. But I'm hoping you can see that one of the things that I'm emphasizing is narcissists have such a deeply entrenched pattern of thinking that so props up their false self. They have to be the one that says my interpretation of life is not just one among many. In their mind, it's like it's the only one that matters. I am the only one that matters. Get out of here. You don't matter, or conform, or lay down at my feet, or give me your complete loyalty, but you don't matter. And they're so stuck in that absurd way of thinking that if you keep going back thinking, but I've got to make you different, one of the problems is you forget, but they're stuck. And so rather than making it your task to get them to see the light, kind of like that person whose parents are 80 years old and they're still at it, your task is to say, well, there is one person I can do something with, and that's going to be myself. And I want to be a person of growth. That's what we're doing here on Team Healthy. So I hope this kind of gives you a reminder and gives you something to think about. Those of you who are new, make sure you put your questions there in the comment section below, and I'll pick up on them. And I really do watch the comments that you give. I can't respond to all of them because there's so many, but I try to keep a pulse, my thumb on the pulse of where you are so that I can respond. And then next week in our live session, we're going to keep going with more questions. So, like I say, put your questions out there and we're going to just continue to go with this because I want you to feel like you're an educated person who knows what's going on and ultimately that you believe in the characteristics of goodness and decency. That's what we're about here on Team Healthy. Okay. Now, I'll see you this time next week. I look forward to it. You guys know that this is a favorite part of my week, and I look forward to hearing from you and what your questions are. And we're going to get into it again next time. See you, Team Healthy. You know that I appreciate you greatly. I really do.